My name is Alexa. I am 33 years old, and for almost 5 years now I have been working remotely, from the kitchen, from the living room, sometimes even from the veranda, if the day is warm and the wind does not play with the papers too much. Lately, I have been living in my parents' house, old, cozy, with a quiet creak of the floor in the hallway and the smell of apple pie, which seems to have grown into the walls since my childhood. It is here that I carry out my daily duties. I work, answer emails, write reports, plan projects, and try not to be distracted by home conversations that every now and then sound from the kitchen, where my mother discusses with a friend what is better, lavender or sage tea. Now I am single, in the sense that I am not married, without romantic commitments, which, as it seems to me, has long ceased to be a topic for awkward conversations, but still sometimes flickers in the eyes of older relatives. My family is my parents and my brother, who got married just a year ago, throwing a beautiful wedding full of light and laughter, where I almost lost my voice giving toasts and singing along to his favorite songs from his childhood. I always sincerely believe that he and his wife Romina were happy, that they had that very real, calm love that begins with friendship and grows in every look, in every movement of the hand. But lately I began to notice that Romina began to visit us more often. Not like before, for dinner on Sundays or to visit with a basket of pastries. But more often. Spontaneously. Without a special reason. This house, by the way, belongs to her relatives, and at first I wondered if she would be embarrassed. After all, the atmosphere here is not the most neutral, with photo albums on the shelves where she has not yet appeared, and with guest towels bought long before she arrived. But to my surprise, she seemed completely at ease. She carried herself easily and confidently, as if she had always been a part of the space, and never showed even a hint of awkwardness. Unlike me, I must admit, I always felt a slight turmoil rising inside, especially when I caught myself looking at her for so long, amazed by her beauty, her grace, her inner composure, which seemed to light up the room as soon as she appeared. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy! Romina, I must admit, has a rare gift, to make me feel like a younger sister. It was not condescending or patronizing, rather, there was a softness and openness in her behavior that inspires trust. She often started conversations in which there was nothing superficial. And one day, while stirring my tea, she suddenly asked me why I still didn't have a boyfriend, and, as if by chance, added, "You don't feel awkward in the company of men, do you?" I was a little embarrassed, but answered honestly, my remote work leaves almost no chance for new acquaintances. I don't go to social events. I don't go to offices where you can accidentally catch someone's eye at the coffee machine. All I have is Zoom, Google Docs, and rare meetings with the courier at the door. Romina listened to me with the kind of attention that rarely listens, without interrupting, without nodding mechanically, but delving into it, as if there was something important and intimate in my words. She nodded, thought for a moment, and said, "You know, I can tell you something. Just a little, just something that makes a woman more confident." So, unobtrusively, she began sharing advice about makeup that emphasizes but does not cover up, about a style that does not require huge investments, but gives you the feeling that you are ready for any moment, for any meeting, for any look. Her approach touched me. There was no edification in it, no desire to remake me. Only care. Genuine. Almost sisterly. She smiled, told about her findings, about creams that are suitable for dry skin, about how you can update your basic wardrobe without throwing out everything old. She encouraged me to get out of my usual comfort zone, to experiment, to allow myself a little more than just convenience. And I felt gratitude, not the polite, formal one, but real, deep, because it was as if she saw me. The real me. Not in the bandana that I often wear to keep my hair out of my eyes while I work, but in myself, the one who can be brighter, bolder, more noticeable. I really started thinking about how I look even when no one is looking. After all, I spend almost all my time at home, and cosmetics have become something rare, almost festive. The main thing for me is that my skin is moisturized, so that nothing interferes with my concentration. I walk around the house in soft pants and stretched t-shirts, and to be honest, it is impossible to imagine myself on the street in this outfit. Romina, it seems, sees me in this form most often. And maybe she does not have a complete idea of how I look when I am preparing for something really important, for my brother's wedding, for example, or for a big family celebration, where I always carefully apply makeup, choose a dress, do my hair. But it seems that Romina does not attach any importance to these episodes. One day she came with some special energy, almost with excitement in her eyes, and suddenly said, "Let's see what you have in your closet." Without waiting for an answer, she walked into my room and with businesslike thoroughness began opening doors, sorting through hangers, examining shelves. I froze for a second, wondering whether to stop her or not, because this was my territory, my intimate zone. But something in her movements, in her confidence, in her goodwill convinced me, let me just watch. I don't have many clothes, but I choose them carefully so that each item matches my style, simple but elegant. And, to my surprise, Romina looked impressed. "Wow, I didn't expect that you have such beautiful clothes, and cosmetics, first class," she exclaimed, blushing slightly. She admitted that she always thought that my favorite brands were too expensive for her. Romina was still in her own rhythm, continuing to go through my things with a sincere, almost childish interest, commenting on each sweater, each scarf, each bottle of perfume with such liveliness as if she were taking part in a fashion show where I was the designer, the model, and the spectator all at once. She opened drawers, pulled hangers towards herself, examined the labels, praised the selection, and with genuine admiration reconstructed entire images in her head, imagining how I could look in this or that outfit. After some time, probably about an hour later, she got to my cosmetic bag, settling down with it on the bed, as if it were a jewelry box, and began to take out one bottle, jar, brush at a time, all the while tirelessly expressing surprise and delight, and all this would have been almost pleasant, if not for the slight feeling that the boundary had nevertheless been violated. I smiled a little awkwardly, gently intervened, cleared my throat and said, "Romina, maybe that's enough for today? It's already a bit late," and, as if hearing a sudden click in her head, she blinked, as if coming back from some kind of trance, and immediately apologized, embarrassed. "Oh, I got carried away. I just love looking at other people's makeup bags. There's so much interesting stuff in them." She sat up straighter, put her brushes back, and suddenly, slightly tilting her head, said with slight thoughtfulness, "You know, you don't need to buy anything. You already have everything, style, taste, and great makeup." And then, as if inspired, she stood up, went to her bag and began to take out a whole armful of winter clothes that she had brought with her for some reason. She laid out sweaters, jackets, and scarves all over the room, and in the blink of an eye the things covered the bed, the armchair, and even part of the floor. She didn't seem to have any intention of cleaning it all up. I watched silently, then said with restraint but firmness, "I carefully select my own cosmetics, you know. I've tried so many things and finally settled on these products. They suit me." Romina looked at me with some new expression, as if I had revealed a secret to her. "Wow," she was surprised, "you have quite a collection here. But you don't use it often, do you?" She narrowed her eyes. I nodded, not knowing what to say in response. "Yes, to be honest, I almost never use cosmetics, unless there is an urgent need. Only when I really need to, some event, a rare meeting, a day when I feel like I want to emphasize my mood." I nodded again, confirming, "Yes, I only apply it when absolutely necessary." Romina pursed her lips in displeasure, crossed her arms over her chest and, looking at me intently, almost defiantly, said, "That will not happen. Next time we see each other, I'll teach you a few makeup tricks. It's a must." I sighed inwardly. Her persistence was tiring, but I didn't want to offend her. She continued to rummage through my closet, taking out something new every now and then, trying on my cardigans and praising the styles. Towards evening, she finally, with a slight weariness in her voice, said that it was time to go home, and began to get ready, leaving behind a trail of scattered clothes that I would spend a long time tidying up. And yet, when the door closed behind her, I was left alone, and the usual feeling of uneasiness returned. I thought again, why did she start coming so often? After all, before she only showed up on holidays, and now her visits had become almost regular. Maybe something was wrong with her and my brother? This thought, unpleasant as a small splinter, settled in my head. Why, if they were doing well, Did she come here so often? Was their relationship falling apart? I felt anxiety rising inside me, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to understand Romina's motives. I was puzzled, confused, and although I tried not to jump to conclusions, my heart told me that something was wrong. My parents, on the other hand, seemed absolutely happy with her frequent visits. They received her with such warmth, as if she were their own daughter. Their words sometimes contrasted with my doubts so sharply that I began to doubt my own feelings. Isn't it great that Alexa now has an older sister? My mother said over dinner, smiling affectionately. We can't wait for Romina to finally give you makeup lessons next time, my father added, winking cheerfully. There was genuine approval in their voices, but soon Mom added, with slight caution, but, of course, you shouldn't rely on her too much, you're independent. I nodded, silently swallowing these words and simultaneously warming up from their care and growing cold from my own worries. Yes, I had mixed feelings. To tell the truth, I never asked Romina for makeup advice. It was her suggestion, her initiative. My life is too busy, too focused on work, for me to easily weave romance or hour-long beauty treatments into it. She did everything herself, with enthusiasm, with pressure, and I was drawn into this whirlpool of her ideas and projects. My parents perceived this as support, as help, as friendship. But sometimes I so wanted her to just give me a little more space, just a little personal silence, especially in those moments when I work, when I am all about tasks, schedules, deadlines. But I couldn't say no outright, because her gestures were manifestations of goodwill. And when I tried to discuss this with my parents, with their endless optimism and warmth, they were frightened by these thoughts, unwilling to accept that Romina could have other motives. Returning to my room, I began to clean up everything she had scattered around, carefully folding each scarf, rolling up the jumpers, hanging up the jackets in their places. And then I froze. Something didn't add up. I looked at the empty space in the corner of the closet, where my favorite sweater usually lay, the same one, made of thick wool, the color of creamy cocoa, with lantern sleeves. Wait, where is my sweater? I muttered under my breath, where is it? Anxiety froze in my throat. I looked around the bed, looked under the chair, looked through the folded things. It was nowhere to be found. A feeling of irritation, like a drop of ink in a glass of water, was slowly spreading inside me. I couldn't remember ever throwing away this sweater, this soft, cozy, slightly itchy sweater at the neck, but loved because it was the perfect length, with just the right sleeve that could be pulled all the way to the toes on a chilly morning, and its sudden disappearance seemed strangely significant in the midst of all the chaos that had happened during the day. In such moments, I always tried to think calmly, to return to the order of things. Every time I update my wardrobe, I do it deliberately, carefully choosing what to get rid of, what to keep. I keep a mental list, maybe not written down on paper, but very clear in my memory. In this way, I tried not to accumulate unnecessary things and at the same time remain true to my style. And I knew for sure, I did not put this sweater away anywhere. I distinctly remembered that I had never parted with this thing, bought only last year at the end of the winter season, when prices were already falling and the mood was becoming dreamy with anticipation of spring. It was almost new. I wore it a few times, and took care of it, carefully putting it on that very shelf, closer to the back wall of the closet. I knew where it should be. And I was absolutely sure that I had seen it in the closet literally this morning, before Romina came into my room and started rummaging through things, remaining there alone for a while I went out to the living room to ask my parents to put the kettle on and get something for tea. I thought then that it would be polite to offer something tasty, because Romina came again without warning, as she does more and more often, and I did not want her to feel like an unwanted guest. But it was in those few minutes that I left her alone in my room. I also remembered that she had brought her bag, a large, soft one with long handles, in which one could easily put something without attracting attention. This thought, which arose instantly, like a flash, burned, but I tried to control myself. A direct accusation of theft, especially without evidence, seemed madness, a thoughtless step capable of ruining everything, especially considering that my parents had accepted her almost as a second daughter. Nevertheless, despite internal persuasion that perhaps I had simply made a mistake, and it had gotten lost somewhere among other things, I felt more and more helpless. But I firmly decided that I no longer wanted to be a victim of circumstances or someone's obsession. Therefore, a month after this incident, I made a decision to invest in an inconspicuous CCTV camera. I chose one that blended into the interior and installed it in my room, foreseeing that Romina's next visit was only a matter of time. And as if according to a script, she really did show up. From the doorway, as always, with a slight enthusiasm in her voice, she announced, "Today is makeup day." And, without waiting for my reaction, she opened the closet again, grabbed my favorite brushes, foundation, and set me down on the carpet, laying out her impressive collection of cosmetics in front of her, which I already recognized painfully, the same palettes, glosses, highlighters. I didn't object. I didn't argue anymore. I just let her put on her makeup, even though I knew I had no meetings or calls that day and would spend the entire evening at home in front of my computer. Half an hour later, when she finished the lesson with a smile and pride, I politely said that I would go wash off my makeup and went into the bathroom. When I returned, she was already standing in the hallway, hurriedly pulling on her coat and saying that she had to go. As if by inertia, I called her. I made tea and snacks in the living room. "Let's sit for a while." She hesitated, then refused, citing a rush. I just nodded, politely said goodbye and was left alone. Only after the door closed behind her and I heard the gate slam, I went to the computer and opened the camera recording. My fingers were shaking. My heart sank. In the video, I saw her, while I was in the bathroom, deftly, without a shadow of a doubt, take several products out of my makeup bag: nail polish, mascara, a bottle of cream that I saved for rare occasions. She carefully put it all away in the same large bag that she brought with her. Her movements were quick, confident, as if this was not the first time. She even looked around before zipping up. I felt my breath catch in resentment and anger. At first, there was numbness, slight disbelief, an attempt to find an excuse. Maybe she just took it by mistake. But these thoughts dissipated like smoke when I watched the fragment again. No. This was not an accident. I copied the recording to my smartphone. Let it be at hand. Let there be proof if suddenly needed. Then, feeling everything boiling inside, I went out into the living room, deciding to talk to my parents. And, as luck would have it, my brother was there at that moment. He looked at me, got up from the couch and said with some strange expression on his face, "Oh, Alexa, I heard that you took makeup lessons from Romina again today. Listen, please stop relying on her so much. She feels obligated to come because of this." His words caught me off guard. I didn't expect him to perceive what was happening exactly like that, as if all this was coming from me, as if I was imposing myself on him, asking for help. I was confused, but found the strength to answer calmly, I don't remember ever asking Romina to teach me. She suggested it all herself." His misunderstanding, his twisted perception of the situation only added fuel to the fire, to my inner anger, to my resentment, to my humiliation. I knew that now I would have to not only explain, but also defend myself, in front of my own family. "Bro, I never invited Romina here for some makeup lessons," I said with restraint but firmly, trying not to give in to the offense, although inside I could already feel the familiar heat of humiliation, as if someone had poured boiling water into my heart. It was entirely her idea. I didn't even ask. I began to explain, but he suddenly interrupted me abruptly, not even letting me finish, with a mixture of irritation and condemnation in his voice. "What are you even talking about, Alexa? Romina is just trying her best to help you. She's worried because you're in a terrible state." These words seemed to hit me in the face. Am I in a terrible state? Me? I stood there in confusion, not believing what I was hearing, trying to find at least some shadow of doubt, at least a grain of compassion in his face, but I saw only irritated superiority. He continued, as if he was just picking up the pace. "I heard from our parents that all you do is sit at home all day in front of the computer. You don't do anything, you don't go anywhere. Romina told me that her house is full of branded clothes, and you have a ton of expensive cosmetics. Where do you get the money for this?" He narrowed his eyes and added, lowering his voice, as if he were communicating something dirty and forbidden, "You probably take money from our parents. We can no longer just sit back and let you run everything here. From this day on, we take on all the chores around the house. I didn't expect that my brother, with whom we grew up together, shared toys, listened to the same bedtime stories, could say such a thing. These accusations were not just rude, they were undeserved and unfair. Lightning ran down my spine from the realization that he considered me some kind of parasite, a parasite on the family, despite all the years of my independence, despite the very work that I do every day, earning honestly, without asking a penny from my parents. He came to the conclusion that I am withdrawn, obsessed with cleanliness, without a goal, without studying, without work, simply because my workplace is not in the office, but in the bedroom behind a laptop. This was far from the truth. My work is stable, permanent, it allows me to live, take care of myself and even save. I do not always share the details of my activities, but I have never hidden the fact that I earn money myself. And I always believe that my parents understand this and support me in my choice. When Mom and Dad returned home, I didn't want to waste time and got straight to the point. I told them Aiden's words, word for word, without exaggeration, hoping that their common sense would help clarify the situation and cool their emotions. But there was no surprise, no indignation, no attempt to dissuade their son. They exchanged glances, as if they had thought it over for a long time, and instead of standing up for me, they began to hum something, uttering indistinct and puh, as if delaying the moment when they would have to take someone's side. I couldn't resist and asked directly, "Dad, Mom, Aiden says that he will live here. Are you really okay with that?" Dad, as if rehearsing a pre-rehearsed phrase, calmly answered, "Well, if Aiden wants to live here, I don't see any reason to refuse him. He is our son." Mom nodded weakly, adding, "Yes, Romina is a wonderful person, and maybe we will all have fun living together as a big family." I froze. It was as if I had been deprived of my voice, breath, support. I, who had lived in this house for the past few years, worked, helped, was deprived of even basic support. And behind me, as if on purpose, my brother's voice sounded, full of triumph. "Unlike you, a neat freak who just sits at home all day, I actually earn money and I have a wife. No one here needs someone like you." I turned to him, holding back tears in a trembling voice. "I'm not a neat freak. I work from home. I do everything to be independent. I don't ask anyone for anything." But he waved me off and said dismissively, "Oh, well, yes, working from home. That's how those who have fallen out of society justify themselves. You're no different from a housewife without a family." Word by word, he was destroying the fragile structure of trust and mutual respect that I thought was still there between us. These words hurt. Deeply. And the most painful thing was that he didn't even try to understand. He was simply deciding for me who I was, attributing to me motives that weren't there. I would like to explain that remote work is not a whim, but a new reality approved by thousands of companies, that millions of people around the world work from home, develop businesses, manage projects, receive a stable income without leaving the house. But he didn't listen. He didn't want to listen. His contempt was like a blank wall. "Okay, clean freak," he finally said, "since you've worked like this, then pack your things and leave. We don't want you to sit here and pretend to be busy anymore." His voice was sharp, commanding, as if he had already become the master of the house. The parents were silent. They looked from him to me, as if they couldn't decide, or didn't want to. Mom pressed her lips together, and Dad looked down, muttering something like, "What to do?" It was strange and frightening to see how the people you loved, who you trusted, who were your support, now stood aside, didn't interfere, let you be humiliated in your own home. The scene seemed unreal, as if this wasn't my family, but a badly acted play with the roles mixed up. But it was all happening. It seemed that everyone around was charmed in their own way by Romina's friendliness, her smiles, her willingness to help, her seemingly genuine concern, and perhaps behind closed doors, casually, over morning coffee or evening conversations, she and Aiden discussed how wonderful it would be to have more personal space in this house, especially if they were planning on having children in the near future, because, unlike me, a lonely, withdrawn woman, their future obviously included grandchildren, family holidays, and cozy photos together. More and more often, I caught glances at myself that read something like regret, restrained condemnation, as if my life decisions were a mistake that the whole family now had to patiently endure. This feeling of being out of place in my own home, where I once laughed, shared news, made coffee for my parents in the morning and decorated the tree on Christmas Eve, suddenly became unbearably clear, distinct, and painfully tangible. And although I tried to hold on until the very end, not to allow myself to be weak, not to show them a single tear, I understood, my position was now shaky, precarious, and more formal than real. So, without losing my dignity, I straightened up, looked straight at Aiden and calmly said, "I understand everything. I will pack my things and take with me all the furniture and equipment that I bought myself." These words, spoken in a cold and restrained voice, caused genuine surprise in Aiden and Romina. "What?" Aiden snorted with disbelief. "You mean to say that you bought this furniture? You, a neat freak who works from home, could afford to buy appliances and furnishings?" He looked at his parents, waiting for confirmation, as if hoping that they would dispel his doubts now. But, to his surprise, Mom and Dad only smiled, and his father, scratching his chin, answered with a slight chuckle, "Well, everything we bought after Alexa moved in, she did. She paid for the refrigerator, the washing machine, even the couch you're sitting on right now, son." Mom added, "And we've been dreaming about a new massage chair for a long time, remember? Alexa considered it an unnecessary luxury." "Well, if her appliances disappear, it's no big deal, because you earn more now, right, Aiden? We'll buy everything new." I stood back and listened as my parents, with their usual naive ease, turned the situation into a joke, trying to lighten the mood without delving into its depth. They were their style, optimists who believed that everything could be fixed, that everything was temporary, that no one should suffer. But there was something superficial in this lightness, some indifference to real feelings, to the resentment that was tearing me apart inside. And the fact that they still hadn't told Aiden that for the past 2 years I'd been doing their property tax records, paying their annual fees, and consulting with lawyers to keep the house in order, this was further proof that they were not inclined to share the truth, especially if it could hurt someone. I remembered how I had heard Aiden mention money in an irritated tone, how everything had become expensive, how city living required investment, and my parents had laughed every time, as if to assure him that everything was under control, just because he was there, and that was enough. I had watched this conversation from the top of the stairs, holding my phone and simultaneously negotiating with the guys from the moving company. I had thought it all out in advance. The next day I was supposed to move into a new apartment. Everything had been agreed upon. A childhood friend, the owner of a small moving company, immediately agreed to help when I wrote to him in the evening, and even offered a discount, saying that it was off-peak season and they would be happy to take on the job. The morning was cold but clear. The movers arrived on time, and we began packing everything quickly and methodically: boxes of dishes, appliances that I had ordered and installed myself, shelves, a chair, even the table at which I had worked for so many years. Everything was being put into the car, and it all happened almost silently. Aiden and Romina stood in the corner of the kitchen, like two confused spectators at a play where no one had warned them about the ending. They looked at each other, as if they still couldn't believe that I was really leaving. I felt their eyes on me, but I didn't turn around, didn't comment, only gave the guys instructions from time to time. Before closing the door for the last time, I walked through the house and instructed the movers to do a final check, to leave nothing, to forget nothing, to leave no reason for reproach. The day had been tough, but I seemed to have entered a mode where emotions recede and all that remains is a plan, tasks, a to-do list. By evening, I was already standing at a new threshold, at a new starting point, with the realization that, despite all the pain, I was taking the right step towards personal freedom, peace, independence. When everything was loaded and the truck was on its way, my friend came up to me and, smiling, asked, "So, are we going to a new place?" I wanted to clarify if everything was okay. "Sorry for not agreeing to help right away. I know, all this is somehow unexpected." I nodded, feeling something letting go inside, and said, "Don't worry, I just want to create a new working atmosphere. And as long as this is my space, everything else doesn't matter." Romina, who had been standing to the side and watching my departure with an expression that mixed confusion and uncertainty, suddenly, as if waking up, broke the silence. She stepped closer, still holding her hands in the pockets of her coat, and said with a distinct tension in her voice, "So you are a writer?" "And this gentleman," she nodded towards my friend, who was standing by the driver's door of the car, "is your editor?" I nodded silently, finding no reason to hide the obvious. In fact, I had long been considering the idea of moving out of my parents' house, because creativity requires privacy, peace, a special spiritual space, which I had been increasingly lacking lately. Rooms where someone entered without knocking, touched my things, left their traces in my order were not a place where a text could be born. I had been patient for a long time, putting off the move because I was busy with paperwork. I helped my parents reduce their property taxes so that they had extra money for everyday needs, and while I was doing this, I felt needed and attached to this house. But everything changed the moment Aiden and Romina decided to move here, as if by unspoken agreement, pushing me out of the space that had been my safe haven for many years. I did not hide my emotions and addressed her directly. "I am glad that you are here now. You can take care of our parents, who, by the way, get their pension from gambling, which has never made them particularly stable. But I am not going to tell you where my new home is now. I'm sorry, but I can't stand the thought of my thief sister-in-law showing up there as if nothing had happened." I pulled my phone out of my pocket, opened the video, and without saying a word, held the screen out in front of me, where I could clearly see Romina looking around, pulling bottle after bottle out of my makeup bag, carefully placing them in her bag. She looked at herself as if she were someone else, an alien, almost ghostly version of herself, and I noticed how her face paled, how the tension twisted her shoulders, how she instinctively turned away, as if she wanted to avoid her own reflection on the screen. My brother and parents, who had recently refused to even consider the possibility of her dishonesty, now looked at her with expressions of cold bewilderment, in which there was that very silence that sounds louder than any accusation. "It's not what it seems," Aiden muttered, and his voice now sounded uncertain, almost pitiful. "It's just that Alexa was always so neat, everything was perfect, and she had expensive cosmetics, clothes, well, it seemed that." He hesitated, realizing that any excuse was sounding more and more stupid. "I thought I was doing her a favor," he finally squeezed out, but even he himself understood that his words didn't change anything. "Romina stole it. And now everyone knew about it." I shrugged, feeling everything that connected me to this story, this house, these people, slowly begin to let go. "Well," I said calmly, "I guess this is the perfect time to break up with everyone." I got into the car, and as my editor started the engine, I glanced in the mirror to see one last time how Aiden and Romina were arguing with our parents right there in the driveway. If they started arguing, the neighbors would definitely notice, and maybe it would be the beginning of some kind of internal awakening. But I was no longer going to be drawn into their drama. Several months passed. My life took on a different flow, calm, focused, almost solitary. I worked, wrote, spent my days in my new house, surrounded by things that belonged only to me, in a silence that I treasured. And then one day, at a book signing at the local library, I saw her. Romina. Exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes, in the same clothes, with the same nail polish, the same one she had once stolen from me. She was standing in line, but when she reached me, she did not open the book, only whispered, "I'm sorry. I need help." I looked at her for a long time, not rushing to answer, and finally, in a restrained, almost icy voice, I said, "I'm sorry, but I don't know anyone who could steal from me and then ask for forgiveness without returning what was stolen." I stood up, said goodbye to the readers and left without looking back, not giving a chance for a continuation. Later, from mutual friends, I learned that after selling the house, my parents stayed to live with Aiden and Romina, but the old order of things began to crack. Without my help, their financial habits got out of control again, expenses grew, gambling habits took their toll, and Aiden's salary became insufficient even for basic needs. My parents began to make demands, became irritated, and increasingly took it out on Romina, accusing her of not helping enough, of not being grateful enough. Eventually, in order to cope with expenses, she had to get a job, and the one who had once built the illusion of an idle, well-groomed life now spent her days in the office, tired and broken, forgetting about dreams of children, because she simply could not afford even the thought of a future in those conditions. And I no longer participate in their lives. I live quietly, Simply work, write, listen to the wind outside the window, and sometimes catch myself thinking how good it is that I left on time.